Good morning. I'm Jonathan Barrett, Chief Executive Officer of CelsiusPro Australia. CelsiusPro is an insurtech firm that provides parametric insurance solutions to agricultural producers. Life and business must continue with climate change. In the following workshop, I will walk you through our frameworks on how we create appropriate weather certificates for the following perils. Drought. Have you ever sat there and wondered what it'd be like if you could insure against a Decile 1, Decile 2 event? Well, you can with parametric insurance or weather certificates. Excess rain. Have you ever been concerned about lost yield or quality downgrades caused by rain at harvest time? Weather certificates can assist. High temperatures. Have you ever been going through anthesis, say, for your canola crop? You get high temperatures, and as a result of that, loss of yield. Low temperatures. Anthesis time, very important. Low temperatures below 0 and -2, the difference in yield, and also stem frost, critical for income. In partaking in these workshops, you'll gain industry-leading knowledge and experience, not only in the future of climate change, but how to manage it. We'll provide an introduction to weather certificates, what they are, and how they can be used. We'll be creating a weather certificate for dry and drought conditions. The third workshop will be creating weather certificates for excess rain. The fourth, creating weather certificates for excess temperature, high temperatures. And finally, creating a weather certificate with multiple perils. Defining climate change, it is a problem in agriculture. Less rain in winter and spring. For broadacre, it's the emergence time at the beginning. If you don't get adequate rainfall, then you have a lower strike rate, less yield. If you don't get a confident spring break, August and September are mainly called the money months. But if you don't get that rain, loss yield, loss income. More extreme rainfall events, more intense rainfall events. And that's what we're seeing that climate change is about, the intensity of the events that we've had in the past. There'll be higher temperatures, more rainfall, and we've witnessed that over the last 3 to 4 years, particularly in Australia. Harsher temperatures, longer droughts, increased fire risk, increased chance of frost in some areas, all major concerns that need to be hedged. More intense and more frequent cyclones, storms, floods, droughts and bushfires. Solutions and insurance solutions need to be found to meet the needs for sustainability. The insurance solutions need to be adequate. They need to be appropriate for the risk. Parametric insurance can provide this. Recent climate has reduced farm profits. This is an example where climate change in dryland broadacre farm profits, right, from 2001 to 2020, you can see that's been affected in a lot of our grain belt on the east coast and some of our grain belt, obviously in the west, where you've seen dramatic swings of up to 100%. Farmers need to be able to weather these storms. Farmers need income in those years of extreme events. Weather certificates can provide a solution for this. Weather certificates can provide that cash flow at the end of a poor season that will enable you to get ready for the next season. Weather certificates are a means to insure against these extreme events and ensure that the farm's income is stable and that production is sustainable. Farm climate risk has increased, and we can see by this chart that it has. You can see that from the historical climate between 1950 and 1999, you can see that these are events which have occurred, but recent climate events have swung and seen this occur quite dramatically. And we can see that, obviously in the lower end towards the higher end. It's this profit range that we try and capture. It's this profit range we try and protect. Issues with the current insurance and risk management strategies. When a farmer plants a crop, he looks towards his quiver of risk management tools. One is reliance on precision agriculture and other technologies. When to sow, when is the right time to sow, when is the right time to add fertilizers, when is the right time to harvest. All very important inputs. But when you look at it, there are limited availability of appropriate insurances to compensate the farmer. Recently, we did some work in horticulture, and in horticulture, there are virtually no insurances. It's more of a hit and miss type of production. When you look at the other types of insurances, when you look at the two types of insurance that we have, one is indemnity and one is in non-indemnity. An indemnity cover needs a proof of loss. An assessor needs to go out to the farm and assess the loss. A non-indemnity is a parametric cover or a weather certificate. These types of covers are paid on the events when they occur. It could be a rain day greater than 30 mils. It could be a high temperature of 35 degrees. It could be less than 50% of your rainfall. All these events can be used. All these triggers can be inputted into the policy, and once it's triggered, it's paid within 20 days. Some of the other risk management strategies we've had in the past haven't quite worked, and there are good solid reasons for why they haven't worked. And I think this is one of the main reasons as to why industry and industry stakeholders need to get behind the ability to be able to create insurance products that actually work. A lot of work has been done in certain federations, at the universities, and also at the coalface with insurance brokers to try and understand what the risks are, how unique they are to a particular farmer. Remember, we had the multiple peril crop insurance. That was a product that we all liked, that was all part, but it became too onerous. Also, risk concentration occurred to it. The reinsurance, which is the other side of the market, couldn't keep up with it, and it was a loss-making cause for them. Hence, that's now out of the market. When we look at parametric or weather certificates, we could get a sense that we can actually get products that are suitable to the individual farmer. And through InsurTech, we can provide those solutions down to a 5x5 kilometre grid. More about that later. When we look at the government and the government strategies, the government has always tried to support industry where it can. We now have the Future Drought Fund, and now that is causing sort of a lot of research to be done on all those risk mitigation services and means that farmers can adopt for sustainability of their business. This has been a big push and is a current push at the moment. When we look at understanding weather data is so critical towards the production of a crop. Rain, the correlation between rain and yield are neck and neck. Without rain, you have issues. One of the keys is always try to address the data. Weather certificates are based on data. And when we look at data, we have to understand what the weather and how the weather is recorded. For instance, precipitation has a high variability due to the range of elements which result in precipitation. Your front for rain can be as wide as 2 kilometres, 3 kilometres, 4 kilometres. When you look at it, the intensity of that rain. So we have to have a mechanism to record it. The BOM provides a good service to recording 5x5 kilometre grid data. Super important for the farmer to look at that grid around his property and make sure that the BOM's data syncs in with the data and his own experiences. Any cover needs to be suitable. It needs to be fit for purpose. And if we're basing the covers off this data, the farmer needs to be happy that this is the data that creates the events that he is concerned about. So when you look at the weather, when you look at a cover, you must look at the basis risk and make sure the correlation between the data that you have and the data that the BOM provides match to a degree that you are comfortable with. And that is critical. We are looking to reduce this basis risk, but it's very simple. It's very easy to look at. It's all online, and the farmer can say, hey, this year I got this amount of rainfall. That makes sense in my grid. This event occurred in my grid. So I get a sense that the covers are more accurate. When we look at the gridded data, there is a good, strong correlation to what happens on farm. Secondly, temperature. When you look at temperature, we tend to find that looking at weather stations and gridded data, there are two forms of data which are just as accurate. When we look for high and low, we tend to like to think that we look at the grid for low because it's more acute, and we're looking for high temperatures, we look at stations. Just because we need to see when it's hot, it's a real wave of hot wind or hot air that comes through, and that's measured on most weather stations. So when you look at your weather certificates, the grid for rainfall, in my mind, is probably one of the best. When we're looking for high temperatures, you can look at the grid or the weather station. Low temperatures, the grid or weather stations. But it is important to keep in mind the two. Gridded data. We've talked about gridded data. It's a 5 by 5 kilometre square grid from anywhere in Australia. It's most commonly used, when official weather stations are not within the vicinity of the farm. The data is accurate, and as we said, the data has to be synced in with your own experiences. If that is the case, then you have the startings and the makings of a very good parametric certificate or weather certificate. Weather station data. There's lots of weather station data out there, easily accessible. Once again, when you look at a weather certificate, you have to note that the settlement on that will be based on these numbers. So it is critical that as a farmer, you get to understand the data, which data your policy is going to be written off, and on the like for the triggers that the policy will pay out on. So you have to have proof of understanding that this is the data that will settle the contract. A reliable and sustainable solution. Well, that's weather certificates. When we look at parametric index insurance for agriculture, we look at a weather certificate. It protects against specific weather events like drought, excess rainfall, drought over the full season, excess rainfall over harvest, or could even be flood. We don't look at the crop damage. It doesn't need to be assessed. But it's those triggers, those trigger events, which we know the event will occur. If it's an excess rain event over harvest, we know the second day of rain greater than 20 mils on wheat, for instance, causes a downgrade. We know for barley it has to be higher. All these phenological fields that we have, we write into the policy. So we can get a sense that when these rain events occur, the policy will pay. The important thing, no damage assessments are needed on the policy. It's just paid. You get the financial relief within 20 days. Claims are processed automatically. It just arrives in your account. And everything is fully transparent because the triggers in the settlement is based off BOM data. When you look to try and write these sorts of policies, you can see that without a weather certificate, you've got substantial risk. Bad seasons, average seasons, and good. We generally feel in Australia that we have 7 years. A couple of really good ones, a couple of not so good ones, and a few terrible ones. But by using a weather certificate, we can smooth that income out. And to me, that's one thing which is very important. We spend a lot of money on our inputs. We spend a lot of money on other insurances, but some of the main areas where we know we can be affected, like the weather, we should be looking at in terms of hedging. Weather certificates are a means to be able to provide the reality that income can be smoothed out over time. Step by step. We've got another 4 series in this line. We've just had a brief introduction, but in my mind, the most important things for any parametric product are to understand the key terms and what they mean, define the risk and the risk period, locate the correct location, analyze the historical data. You want to make sure that those years where the events have occurred where you've lost yield or lost income, make sure that they're all in the same and that you understand the events that cause those triggers. So you analyze the historical data, look for the top 20 highest rainfall years perhaps, or the lowest 20, and that'll give you an idea of the history around your property. Define the parameters, define the triggers and the thresholds. Tailor the parameters that they make sense to you. You know how much subsoil moisture you have. You know how far the crop will go, what will cause grief. It's these sorts of things that farmers know. We just rely it into the risk matrix. Purchasing the hedge, obviously, very simple. There's not long-worded policy documents. All policies or certificates are all within sort of 2 to 3 pages and very easy to understand. And then, of course, you can monitor the progress of your hedge online by looking at any of the BOM sites or looking at the CelsiusPro site. So let's workshop a few examples. So stay tuned, right? And the next seminar will be on its way. Thanks for your attendance.